Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the City of Bettendorf Committee of the Whole meeting. Today is Monday, May 1st, 2023. It's 5 o'clock p.m. Before we get started with our operational items, we have a very special day here at Happy Joe's. It's Decker Plain's birthday. So, in honor of that, a quick rendition of Happy Birthday is in order.
Not from me, Your Honor.
Happy birthday to you.
This is on YouTube.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Decker. Happy birthday to you. I think we did it from our front one last. It was his birthday on a council night.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We've kind of got a tradition.
That was very
Captain,
nice.
could you take him in?
Now we
I would
need
have
to
preferred
talk
the bottle of
about.
scotch.
Well, that may be coming too. An operational item on the landing project. For that, we welcome our Public Works Director, Brian Schmidt, our City Engineer, Brent Morlock, and our Director of Culture and Recreation, Kim Kidwell. Brian, you're going to kick it off and hand it off to your teammates?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Tomorrow night, item number 13 is a resolution awarding the contract and approving the contract and bond for the landing project. Brent Morlock, City Engineer, Culture Recreation Director, Kim Kidwell has worked diligently, as well as with our Finance Director, Jason Schatt, on securing the financing for this. And tonight, we're going to be going over a quick presentation, kind of going over the numbers of that were submitted by all the bidders. And what we're going to be doing is recommending approval of GCI Contractors of Bettendorf. I'm going to turn it over to Brent, who will take it off from here.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brian. Okay, so a much anticipated project that we've been waiting for our bids to get in. We did receive what I think is a very successful bid on Tuesday of last week. I do have a graphic here that I think will help explain what turned out to be a very lengthy council letter, trying to explain the various funding sources and the numbers that we did receive.
Sure.
So we did receive a base bid. We actually received a total of 3 bids. We bid it project as a base bid, and then there were several add alternates, knowing that we were right up against our budget number. So we did that so that way they were not included in the base bid. We could kind of a la carte bring those in if the budget allowed. So the base bid includes basically everything you see on the screen here, and I'll go through the color coding. The alternates were for a change in some fencing to do some more decorative fencing up towards the front if we were able to, as opposed to just a powder coated or a vinyl coated chain link. The shade structures we identified as alternates, knowing that there were a pretty big dollar item that was attached to those. And there was also a bid alternate for the Ninja Ropes course that was an amenity in the main activity pool that we were a little uncertain on where that was going to come in as well. So we included several bid alternates. So our base bid from the apparent low bidder, which was GCI, so that is General Constructors, Inc. out of Bettendorf, a local company, was just over $19.2 million. We have a total project budget right now identified if we consider both the splash, the aquatic component, and then frozen landing of $21 million. So that is $18 million on the pool side, which is the 666, the third share between us, the YMCA, and the various foundations that we've been able to receive funding for. And then approximately $3 million that's been preliminarily identified for frozen landing. So what you see, let's go through this. The yellow and red are the 2 main phases of this project. So originally we had planned, and the bid documents read as such, that we were gonna try to get all the construction done by Memorial Day, basically, of 2024. It took our first pre-bid meeting for the contractor to tell us that was really aggressive, which we knew, but the lead times and some of the delays that they were looking at, especially on items like electrical gear, were most likely not going to allow for that to happen. If they were to try to make that happen, they were going to throw a lot of extra money on it, and we simply didn't have any room left in that budget. So we had a conversation between the city and the YMCA, and we agreed that we would phase in the project after hearing from the contractors. So what you see in yellow outline is what we're calling phase 1 of this initial project. And this is only as it relates to the swimming pool items. So everything else, all the buildings, all the parking lots, all the drive aisles, everything, that will all be completed by May of 2024. So that's next year. That'll all be done. Phase 1 for the amenities will just be the large activity pool. So that part of the issue we were having is the size of the site. So that pool has a bottom elevation when you get into the bottom of the foundation and the subdrains of over 20 foot deep. And if you look how close that is in proximity to that large slide tower and the lazy river, we physically can't dig all those holes at once without some pretty serious excavation, and that laid excavation protection, and that led to an issue in that the contractors couldn't be working on all this simultaneously. So that was one of the big reasons that we looked at that split. So the phase one would be the large activity pool. So we all thought that would be our biggest priority, is that the community does not have to go another year without a pool.
Okay.
So, and we need to remember this pool is about 30% larger than what our existing pool is without all the other amenities. Phase two, so the contractor would shut down, so we would not have active construction while the pool was open. So they would shut down for the summer. We would clean up the site as best we could. You know, they may have to demob some of their stuff off, but that's all included in the bid. And then they would come back, probably figuring right about Labor Day, and restart construction, and they would have till the following, basically end of April. We want to keep that tight to deliver the spray pad and the lazy river and the slides. So not the outcome that we wanted initially, but we knew going into this that construction schedule was very aggressive, and you know, unfortunately we heard that from the contractors, and they confirmed that, and we ultimately held to our bid number. That was our budget, was what the budget was. We did not have any way of going past that. There was no reserve, so we stuck to that. So that is our initial, the initial bid. Now, what I wanted to point out on the screen, the blue buildings that you see listed there, those are associated only with aquatics. So you have this portion of Building A, that is the bathhouse. So that's all your restrooms, shower facilities, lockers, and such. This building here is the administration and some office buildings and concession stand for, basically for the pool only. And then this building down this corner, Building D, is our pool equipment building. So those are all to be funded out of that $18 million budget, the third. The green buildings that you see, so this building here, Building B, this is our warming house, our community building. That is being separated strictly from a budget perspective. It's still included in the project. It needs to be built now with all the structures. That's going to be our best, most cost-effective route, but that funding will be applied towards the frozen landing budget. And then the green portion, this is actually all one connected building, but the green portion you see here is Zamboni storage, mechanical, electrical, and HVAC systems for that storage system, as well as the chiller yard that's right behind it, and also just some general storage for the railings and other things that we'll most likely take down in the summer to try to make that truly a multi-use space. So those two buildings alone are right at about $1.3 million. Then you add in the fact that we're going to mass grade the site. We're going to run all the utilities for everything as best we can. You know, we won't be running any of the chiller lines or anything like that, but the chiller itself will be there. The electrical gear that's associated with this is all upsized because of frozen. It's about 3 times as large as we would actually need if this was just going to be a pool, simply because of the chiller and the needs, the power needs that draws. That adds an extra couple $100,000. So in the letter, you'll see that I've got an estimate right at about 1.6 million that is attributable to the frozen landing budget. So what we're asking for would be a total purchase order of 19.6 million. So that is a little above the base bid. That covers the 1.6 million from frozen that is solely our responsibility. And then the 18 million for the pool would also include a few of those ad alternates that we'll be able to bring in that really we've considered as part of the base project from the beginning. They're amenities that nobody wants to cut. We just had to identify those separately to make sure we had the ability to pay for them. That's probably on the range of maybe $400,000, somewhere in there. We will go through, just like any project will of this size, a value engineering exercise with the contractor. They know things, better ways to do things that designers don't always know. And we're hoping to shave off, maybe 1%, somewhere in there, 1.5%, 2% tops, fairly minor changes, just efficiencies that will allow us to bring in as many of those amenities as we can. So we are sticking tight to that $18 million for the pool, and then rolling over the additional funds to frozen. As I said, GCI was the low bidder. The other 2 bids were Russell Construction and Tricon Construction that was out of Dubuque. Russell was about $2 million higher on the base bid. Tricon was another $3.5 million on top of that. So well outside our budget. We think the GCI budget is a wonderful, or GCI bid, excuse me, is a great number for us. It's responsive. They're going to phase in that construction like we talked about. That was done via addendum. We have no concerns beyond that.
Any questions for Brent before we move over to Kim? Bill?
Decker, I can only guess that this phasing may help us with our cash flow on this project.
Well, remember that SCRA is a 12-year commitment, so we've got to cash flow them, and the RDA is a 5-year commitment, so we got to cash flow that. So I think the answer to your question is obviously yes. And I would look more to the finance director than, the flunky city administrator that, doesn't do all of our math, but the answer is yes.
I can confirm.
And I do have another thing, Your Honor.
Yeah, go right ahead, Bill, then we'll go to Jerry.
I had the pleasure of managing a project for a local business a couple of years ago that GCI was general contractor, low bidder on. Very good experience with them. They collaborate well, they communicate well. Project came in on time and on budget. So I'm very comfortable with GCI being the contractor for this project.
Of death.
And I would just add one point, because we have had some conversations with Jim Russell. Russell bid the project to complete everything by May 24th, which is why it was $2 million higher. We think that this, as we put out in an addendum that gave the contractors the opportunity to do this, and that was communicated, this puts us at the budget. And so when Brent says it's $2 million higher, they were trying to complete everything by next year. And obviously, that would have been our preference, but we couldn't meet the budget. And we think it's more important from a budget standpoint if we can get part of this open and operable for this summer. And remember that there's a zero depth entry in that yellow phase, so that little ones can still get into the portion of the pool with zero depth and have the ability to have fun versus what I call the splash deck for them. It still has a large part of our community can be served next year, and then we'll come back with the rest of the amenity the following year, and it will absolutely be spectacular at that point in time. So we think this gives us the ability to keep the budget as well as serve the community and get all the buildings built for Frozen as we move forward on that project. So
Would that then maybe be in the third year?
So the hope is if the funding is all available, it may be a matter of logistics of having contractors have the ability to work, to have enough space to work, because we are a tight space. But ideally, once we cost that out and final plans, I would love to bring that back and ask council to change order that in to this contract with the same contractor. They're already on site. You save mobilization costs. You save a lot of efficiencies to do so.
Okay. Okay, Jerry first.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have several questions. So does the scope of work here for this 19.2, does that include all of the parking, the landscaping,
Yep.
the furniture? I mean, this place
absolutely.
shouldn't need a lot of furniture. Oh, okay, so thank you. And then the 1.2 or 1.4 that's left out of the 3 million for the ice rink, you think that's enough to
We're
to
really
cover
close.
it?
We may be a little short, just because we haven't done the final design yet, but I think on the range of a couple 100,000. I think when you start looking at that, that's less than 1% on a $22.5 million project. But yeah, there is not a lot of work left. There's the paving around the deck paving, essentially. There's the railing systems, and then the coolant. It all depends on really how much we want to add or not add to that. So if you don't want additional aesthetic, we're not going to call them shade structures because we're in the winter, but some kind of, those kind of trellis structures that we've identified, gas fire pits, things like that. If you want to cut back on some of the amenities, I think we can absolutely hit that 3. If we want to consider all those, we may have to look at funding a little more on that end.
And then the 1.1 that we've awarded to RDG for design, does that include designers' work during construction?
Yes.
And it includes the design for the pool, too? I mean, for the ice rink, too?
Yes, yep, we just
So-
physically didn't have enough time and manpower to get that design done, but yeah, we are done with professional service fees. Other
Okay.
than some testing fees from Terracon, that'll be our usual, that we do for any civil project.
And then my final question is, where does the additional 1 million come from? Initially, the project was 18 million, and that included design and construction. And now we're gonna spend the full 18 million on construction, and we've already spent the 1.1 on design. So that means we're 1.1 short. I assume we've got an answer to that, but
I can venture an answer. Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the 1.1 is also design on the ice portion.
Correct. There's about
so-
400,000 out of that number.
A portion of it goes to the ice, a portion to the pool. As Brent had stated, we have $18 million in identified and committed funds towards the pool project. We also have an additional $1 million CAT request that a contingent of staff is going to Des Moines this week to help secure, to get the pool side to a $19 million number. On the ice rink side, the city has already committed $1 million to the construction, including that general corporate purpose bond that we repurposed just a couple of weeks ago, and then some gaming and sales tax dollars. We've also identified the potential sources for the remainder amount. And then there's also, as part of that CAT request, an ask of the county of $50,000. Not a lot, but every little bit helps. So all in all, we've identified about $23 million to complete the entire project, ice and pool. And in discussions with Brent last week and earlier today, we think that's a really solid number to get construction and design out the door in a completed project.
thank you. I think, Decker, you were gonna get us a spreadsheet for that, right?
So Jason's got, I think, a spreadsheet. I'm not sure it's totally complete, but it'd certainly be complete by tomorrow night.
Yep.
But to the point, 4 or 5 of us are going to Des Moines on Thursday. We requested $1 million from the CAT program. I'm pretty confident that they'll fund $500,000 in my mind, and I think we got a good shot at the entire enchilada. And then we have secured, we got a check on Friday for $300,000 from the Bechtel Trust. And if you remember, we asked the Bechtel for $1 million. And in that letter, the Bechtel indicates that this is, represents their continued commitment, and we will make additional contributions when the financial situation permits. I believe that there's an additional probably $550,000 to $600,000 there that will come to us. So I'm confident we're still getting sources to be able to cover those additional contributions we talked about. So we'll know by Friday, I think.
Yeah, because our initial plan was 6 million from private sources.
I think that the $6 million will be covered. I'm confident of that.
Thank you.
Greg, and then we'll go to Frank.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the skating rink, is that going to be a second year, or is that going to have to go to 3?
If everything goes to plan, we would open that there's a potential for the winter of 2024.
Okay.
There's not a lot of work left. So again, it's a matter of space, and I think originally when we talked about phasing this, we were talking about trying to include this splash pad as part of the first phase for the reasons that Decker talked about, to make sure we could accommodate families. That did not give us any room to work. We physically could not move an excavator from one side to the other. Everything's too tight. But if we're able to not step on everybody's toes on that side, the east side of the site, and let the west side be, I think we can get both of those done.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
You bet. Frank?
Thank you, Your Honor. Brent, are there going to be a need for additional service agreements on a project this size compared to our old pool, which was considerably smaller, and then the ice rink? Is there a need for a,
So all that would be through the Y.
okay, that's
through all
why
the
I was-
operations.
That's why I was asking.
I don't think there will be nearly as enough. I mean, they do have dedicated staff that maintains their pools in-house, so I think they'll take care of a lot of that. But yes, that'll all be on them, that none of that cost will come to the city.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, just to point out, Brad has been locked at the hip with Brent in all of these discussions and all the meetings. So, and Kim can probably comment on that if she wants, but we're very comfortable that all of the desired outcomes that the Y was wanting with this project are met, and they're ready for us to proceed as well.
Yeah, it's actually been Brad himself that sat in on all our progress meetings with his maintenance director, so they've been along for the entire project.
Anything further for Brent on engineering? Yes.
Well,
Nick.
just around construction and start off, the first question, what's the timeline on demolition, like starting?
Once we get the contract approved, they were talking as early as having somebody on site to bring equipment in as next week.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's gonna happen that quick, but they are already working with all their subs to identify that. We're gonna do a little work on 23rd to make sure we can get them in and out. We've already talked about that, so they're ready to go.
There you go, okay. And then second follow-up to that, I think it'd be an interesting idea to do, set up a time lapse, similar to the bridge construction, just to give people the excitement and keep building on it. I'm volunteering Angie maybe for something she can't say no to because she's not here, but just a thought. I think it'd be neat to see the progress and be able to share it with the community.
Well, Jay's here, and Jay's been running the drone like nobody's business, so it's-
Perfect, yeah, absolutely. I
we
think
can
it's a great
have
idea.
Jay do drones as we go along.
Great.
Jeff's pointing.
Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Palzensky, you'll be pleased to know that Angie's actually at a government social media conference right now with Denise in Reno. And she just texted, she's following along, eating her Wendy's at the airport. But yes, we can certainly set up a time lapse at a location to be determined for sure, so.
Very good.
Awesome.
That's just a darn good idea.
All right. Director Kidwell.
Did they win enough?
Your Honor, I don't have too much to add, other than we just really wanted to stay within the budget. So obviously, wasn't our plan number one. However, I think this will allow us to finish everything, including the ice rink, by 2024, hopefully, or at least the first part of the pool. So I think in order to get it open next year, and as Mr. Plain alluded to, and also Mr. Morlock, there is a zero depth entry that also has a splash feature there. So I think there's definitely, in the big activity pool, there's definitely areas for all ages. So I think that will be okay for the first year.
Awesome. Anything for Kim or any other thoughts? As we value engineer, and obviously if there are certain amenities that we think we're going to come back to do, it might behoove us to try to find the ability to do it now as opposed to in the future due to the mobilization costs and the increase in costs and
Yep, that-
inflation. It just seems like
Absolutely
if
the intent.
we're gonna come back and do it, maybe we find a way as best we can to do it.
Correct.
My thought. Well, thank you all for your work. Great job. We appreciate you. Awesome. This is on tomorrow night's operational agenda, so we don't need a motion to keep it there or approve its review like we would a consent agenda item. Speaking of which, consent agenda item J. For that, we welcome our Community Development Director, Mark Hunt. This is about 4060 Middle Road and was submitted by Ridge Investment Group. Mark, thanks for being here.
Don't have a monitor in front of me, so. it's gonna be this way. Thanks, Your Honor. I don't have what's on that screen in front of me for some reason, so I'll just kind of orient myself a little bit to present here. So you did mention. Your
Why
Honor,
is that, I
Railroad
wonder?
Woodfield Drive.
I think it's just, I think.
Go right ahead, you're fine.
Yeah.
I was just inquiring as to why that might be, but We'll fix
I
it
don't know the
later.
answer- I don't know the
You
answer
can
to that
see the
question,
big
yeah.
screen. It's fine with us.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so
sir.
Yes, sir. Middle Road and Woodfield Drive, we have a site development plan coming before you today. There we go. Thank you, whoever did that. Gods above us.
Jay, way to go.
Just a little background to orient you geographically. This is just north of Belmont Road at the intersection of Woodfield Drive, which is this kind of north-south road here and Middle Road here. Ron's Toy Box is a kind of well-known established business that you're probably aware of. This is 1.26 acres. The proposal is for 9,970 square foot of retail space. I just kind of threw in the slide there, limited use or limited retail service is the use type. Remember, through zoning, we regulate use types, not users. So a limited retail use type is anything under 10,000 square feet that provides general goods and services to residents, or general goods to residences. So that would be, not defining differences between maybe a high-end retailer or a low-end or medium-end retailer. The way our code works, it's based on size. This is what we would call a limited retail service, based on the square footage of the building. The applicant is Chris Wynn. He's with CJW. They're a consulting engineer firm that does work for Dollar Tree. Zoning map is interesting in this case. It's C2 where the site is proposed to be developed. There is an enclave of C5 kind of tucked in this commercial area, the Woodfield Drive and Crown Point Circle neighborhood. And they're probably obviously the most impacted because they're the nearest to the site development plan. I'll show you some things they took into consideration as they developed the site plan. There's also some other residential A2 kind of remnant large lot A2 residential district here, and R4, and then lots of other commercial nearby. I would note on this original plat that there is a shared entry that was platted in 2016 between lots 1 and 2. Lot 1 is still vacant, but when that develops, it will also use this shared entry here. Here's a site development plan. This is slightly different than what was presented at Planning and Zoning, and I'll just highlight that for you quickly. Maybe I will. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I still won't. Okay, well.
Mark, I'm sorry, the telestrator is still at the repair shop.
10-4. So imagine John
A yellow
Madden.
line that I'm now drawing.
John Madden doing the best you've ever seen.
Pow.
Yeah, right here. So what they've done is added some kind of medium height, maybe 10 feet or less, shrubbery and bushes into this landscaped buffer area. Now, we do have a 15-foot landscape buffer area required between these two districts, the C2 district and the R5. They exceed that, in fact, and they've gone through and they're gonna plant these shrubs to even kind of bolster up that landscaping between the neighborhood that I just mentioned and this development. I would point out that your building elevation is roughly 80-some feet at the closest point to the back of curb. And sometimes, even more than that from this neighborhood. And of course, there's a road in between the two. But we were happy to see that. Technically speaking, we're gonna need a little help from Mid-American because to plant anything under the power lines, even though these things are 60 feet in the air, we do have an encroachment easement agreement that has to be signed. We do those all the time. It's not a big deal. We'll just make sure that that gets done before we do any building permits. And that enhancement did come through the planning and zoning process and was brought up by our commissioners at that meeting. I would like to point out again that kind of dual service entry here off Middle Road. This will be the main point of entry as we see it. There is another entry up here off Woodfield Drive. There has been some concern aired by residents about this entry, and I think maybe by the church as well. Not certain on that one, but people have talked about this becoming a cut through because you can enter the church parking lot. They do have access control in that parking lot. I drove it this morning. So there's a gate the church can actually close that would be in place if they so choose. It's on their property. I'm not sure how functional that would be, but it is an option for them. In talking with the applicant about this drive aisle, their concern is that if they don't have the dual entry, truck movements, delivery movements, trash pickup, the trash center is right here, does get more difficult because then you have more backing movements. In looking at this from a planning and zoning perspective, fire perspective, and engineering, we think this is probably the most efficient way to design the site. And we would contend that it should probably stay that way. Other things to point out, they use some larger caliper trees here to meet their tree counts. They don't get tree factors for these shrubs. They're not large enough, but we do want to see them there. So they get all their tree factors done by these larger caliper trees, and they'll be fine on that. They need 50 parking spaces, or 49.5. They've got 50. They've got their ADA spaces here. This is the front of the building, so the front faces Middle Road, which I think is good for the residents over here in the neighborhood. 1 story, it does have a bit of a parapet wall or false front. I'll show you that here in a second, where the Dollar Tree sign's located. And there's also a standalone sign here. So here's your elevations. This is facing Middle Road. These would be some ADA spots. They're not shown here on the elevation, but there would be some ADA spots, I think, in this location. And then again, just 1 story, kind of that false front on the top. That's not a 2nd story. It's just more of a parapet wall. It was approved unanimously by the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 19th. Staff did support the application. We do have the 4 conditions. Number 4 is the new one I just kind of added, if you will, after the P&Z meeting or at the P&Z meeting. So we've got the dual driveway entrance. We've got some stormwater calculations that will need to be done. That's pretty much normal course. We don't waive any applicable fees or laws, of course, and then we want that easement encroachment agreement for shrubs required prior to the building permits being issued. Should not be a big deal. We do that fairly commonly. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mark? Nick, then Jerry, and then we'll go to my left.
What are the signage requirements that they will have out front? Is it gonna be a tall sign, or will it be, I don't know what they're called, the low parkway signs or something like that?
Yeah, lost my screen, Jim. So I can't read the note because I don't have the screen in front of me anymore, but this is where they're calling out their sign and sign type.
20-foot
So they're calling
tall
it a pylon
pylon
sign.
sign.
Yep,
All right.
so that's 20 feet tall, it looks like.
Okay.
And then there will be on-building signage as well, which you saw in the elevations.
Okay, thank you.
And that would, off the cuff, that would meet code, that would meet our sign code.
Jerry?
Thank you, Your Honor. So on the storm drainage, all the storm drainage goes to the water quality basin in the back?
Yep, so that slows the water down, holds it, cleans it, and lets it out.
And then where does it go from there? Into the sewer, or does it go to a detention pond?
I will ask my engineers.
There's a regional detention basin on the other side of Woodfield. And I'll say regional in that it handles the Crown Point additions as well as these 2 sites that it was designed for. But it was designed prior to water quality requirement, which is why we're including it here.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Greg?
Could you go back to my curiosity is when people are exiting the driveway to the north, are there houses like right across the street?
There is a neighborhood entrance here. There is side yards here, and there are some front yards here, if I could maybe get to near map. Let me just try and pull up near map. I think that's gonna be easier to.
Okay.
Easier to answer your question using near map, if you just give me a second, sir.
Yes, sir.
Because
Thank
I
you.
understand the point you're making.
Mark, while you're bringing that up, I'm looking at it. There is a pretty good amount of space between the 2 sets of buildings, and it does appear like that's going to align into the green space behind them and not directly into one of them.
Look like this? With all that water.
Doesn't like me.
When they were, when they were putting in the new entrance into Scott Community off of Belmont, the neighbors asked that the driveway be moved a little bit because when the cars were coming out, it was shining right into their living rooms.
Sorry, Greg, I'm
No, that's okay.
struggling with technology right now.
That's right. So did they, is that, why is the, I guess, why is the driveway, the second entrance there as opposed to not closer to the middle?
You mean not directly across from the other road? Is that your question?
That or even down further, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark, if you bring back up the site layout, you can see that, Greg, it aligns with their delivery access into the back. Otherwise, that truck would have to
Oh, I see.
negotiate in through the parking lot.
Okay. Okay,
And this also direct access to their
trash.
dumpsters too. Yep.
But you don't think that's gonna be a problem with the,
I think there are externalities related to this project. You have a small neighborhood of R5 surrounded by commercial. So there will be externalities. I think they're mitigated as best you can.
okay, all right, thank you.
Bill?
Can we go back to the plat? Okay. So any access to Lot 1 will come off that shared middle drive between Lot 1 and 2. The second access is going to be through an easement that's through Ron's Toy Box currently. So you have both of those accesses relatively close to Middle Road for Lot 1. Again, to piggyback on Greg's question, why was it incumbent to have the driveway so close to the residential properties and not closer to Middle Road? And I know that they have some logistic issues with their site plan, but they should be able to design around those. So we're gonna have a similar problem with Lot 1, and I don't see that that can be addressed any other way. Whereas Lot 2, we've got the second entrance to Lot 2 quite a ways back on Woodfield Drive, not closer to Middle. So it's just a question. I was wondering if that was ever asked.
I don't know if the question was asked. I think the concern here was, again, trying to ask them to mitigate activity bothering these neighborhoods as much as possible. And they had to put it somewhere. If they put it here, then you had the houses with lights shining directly on
Right.
them. And this was maybe the least impactful, but their design is their design.
Other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's take this up. If you would like it to remain on consent as item J, we'd need a motion and a second.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir?
I would like to make a motion to take consent agenda item J and put that on the regular agenda for tomorrow night.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to move consent J to the regular agenda. I think then, team, that would probably be at 15, move consent to 16. We have a motion and a second. Michelle, please call the roll.
Adamson,
Aye.
Brown. Aye. Connors.
Aye.
Nauman.
Aye.
Sexer.
Aye.
Baden.
Aye.
Palczynski.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move that to our regular agenda. Any further questions for Mr. Hunt at this time? Let's take it up tomorrow. Now, Mr. Hunt and Kathleen Richland, our Director of Human Resources, actually, can you help us with consent T, the resolution authorizing you to sign a contract with Wellmark CVS as our pharmacy benefit manager?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Holmes Murphy, our current broker, reviewed the city's pharmacy contract and prescription utilization and realized a potential savings with another vendor due to lower prescription costs and higher rebates. Wellmark CVS is a pharmacy benefit manager, and they took the information and repriced the prescription usage over the past year, and it was noted that if the city had Wellmark CVS as the pharmacy benefit manager, the city would have realized approximately $200,000 in savings. Aside from the savings of the cost, another benefit with switching to Wellmark CVS is that employees would only have one card between the health insurance and the prescriptions. Currently, we obviously have two, since Elixir, our current vendor, is a carve-out. So there's two cards, so it's easier for the employees. Another benefit would be the accumulators toward deductibles and out-of-pockets would be in real time, as the prescriptions would be under the same roof as the health insurance, and therefore the employee experience would be smoother and avoid unnecessary out-of-pocket monies if the accumulators were off between the two of the prescription and the health insurance. Switching to Wellmark CVS, there's also minimal disruption in terms of prescriptions. An employee would just have to move their specialty item to another location. So it's very, very minimal disruption to the employee. So based on this information that we gathered from Holmes Murphy, we would recommend utilizing Wellmark CVS as the pharmacy benefit manager effective July 1 of 2023 for city employees.
Questions for Kathleen? Bill?
I would assume that new prescription cards will be coming out to the employees.
That's correct. We would have had new insurance cards already because we have a change in deductible starting in July, and this will just fit right with it with the information that will be included for the prescription.
Thank you.
Anybody else with a question for Kathleen? Then I'd like to entertain a motion that this remain on tomorrow night's agenda as consent item T.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll take it up on our consent tomorrow night. Speaking of which, why don't we take a look at our consent agenda? Are there any other items on the consent agenda that any particular council member has a question or thought about at this time?
Your Honor, we might note that we had a 5-hour Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and all those items are on this setting public hearings for 2 weeks from tonight. And so that meeting agenda will be very full, and will probably be a set of long meetings. So we just wanted to urge you to plan accordingly. It'll probably be a very long night.
We may be setting a record, but it won't be a short one.
It will not be a short record meeting. Thank you for that
Jerry, consent.
observation, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. For those items, I know when I read the minutes where they talked about trees and landscaping on those lots, and that apparently the developer has promised to do that. Do we want to put that in written conditions so that some future owner, in case the church goes belly up or something, to require trees?
So all you're doing is setting the public hearing here tonight.
Right, yes.
It would seem appropriate for that action to occur, I think, at the time of the zoning, unless Chris wants to contradict.
Yeah, any sort of conditional zoning, those conditions would need to be made before the close of the public hearing that we're setting at this next meeting. So I do think it's, we will have, to the extent the developer wants to provide those conditions, we'll have those in writing prior to the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then I'd like to entertain, oh, Frank, did you have one?
Thank you, Your Honor. Brian, are we going on the pavement markings, item F? Are we going to try and go with 2 markings this coming year?
Unfortunately, sir, we do not have that in our budget this year. As Brent informed council last cycle, it would pretty much double the price that you see in front of you. So we just don't have that money allocated in this particular fiscal year.
We'll be trying to do it the following year then?
We can add it in there, and we can also have a good discussion on during goal setting and when we move into the budget for the following year.
Yeah. Brian, something to add to that. That budget has increased from, I think it was $160,000 when I started, and it's $220,000 already. So in 6-7 years, it's added $10,000 a year simply by the fact we only have one contractor. and he happens to do the entire Quad Cities, all 5 cities that do annual programs, he does it. If we do decide to look at that, you may pay more than double simply because he may not have the manpower to try to do it. Unfortunately, that's a service that we are lacking in the area of somebody big enough to handle an entire city's program.
Business opportunity.
Does sound like a business opportunity. Maybe we bring it in-house. Anything else on consent any council member would like to discuss at this time?
I'll get my 6 paid roll.
All right, let's entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, but for the change, consent J, moving to our regular agenda at this.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I sent you guys an email about my trip to Denver. Great experience, and there's some stuff there that you can take a look at. Happy to talk about that at another time, should you wish to do so. Anything else from council to be added this evening? All right, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Oh, Mr. Plain, what you got?
Just 2 things. First off, a good shout out to Brent and Brian and Kim on their work on the landing.
Yeah.
This has been a labor of love and in some cases, a labor of time. And Brent's done a great job of working through with lots of difficult stuff. And like I said, he's had Brad nailed to his hip. And we feel good about this partnership, and Kim has stayed with them the whole time. So we're grateful for that. And then as part of that, just wanted to point out that, as I mentioned earlier, in the bidding process, not everybody bid exactly the same. And so there may be some contention that we bid the whole project versus the way that we did the addendums. And I just wanted to make sure that you understood that the way that we explained it to you and the way it was pursuant to the addendum, everything is perfect here in terms of being able to do this. And we believe that it's the best recommendation for us to move this project forward. And we wanted to make sure you understood that. So with that, I just wanted to compliment these guys and say this has been a long haul, but we're there.
And quick. Been working hard and fast. Terrific. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. And second?
Second.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you all. Good